You already know this story. A young man takes his inheritance, wastes it in a far country, hits bottom in a pig field, and comes crawling home to a father who forgives him. We even have a name for it, the Prodigal Son. Many editions print that as a heading at the top of the page, as if it were the story's own title. But it is an editorial heading. Jesus never gave this story a name at all, and the name we later gave it may be pointing at only half of what is going on. Because here is the first thing almost everyone misses. The word prodigal does not mean sinful, or lost, or rebellious. It comes from a Latin word, Prodigus, and it means recklessly wasteful, lavish to the point of folly, spending like there is no tomorrow. And once you know that is what the word actually means, you have to ask an uncomfortable question about this story, because there are two people in it who spend recklessly. One of them is the boy, and the other one, the one who spends far more foolishly, and with far more to lose, is the father. By the time we are done, you are going to see that the most extravagant person in the parable of the prodigal son is not the son. And once you see who it is, you cannot unsee it. You are also going to see something even stranger. That Jesus told this story and then, on purpose, refused to give it an ending. Before we touch the story, look at the room it was told in, because Luke tells us exactly who was standing there, and it changes everything. Luke chapter 15 opens with a scene. The tax collectors and the sinners, the people the respectable had written off, were all pressing in close to listen to him. And the religious professionals, the Pharisees and the scribes, were standing at the edge, muttering. Their complaint is one short, poisonous sentence. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. That is the trigger. Jesus does not answer them with an argument. He answers them with 3 stories in a row, and all 3 are about the same thing. Something that was lost, a search, and a party when it is found. A shepherd loses 1 sheep out of 100 and leaves the 99 to go after it. A woman loses 1 coin out of 10 and turns the whole house upside down to find it. And then the 3rd story, the long one, about a man who loses not a sheep or a coin, but a son. Notice the escalation. Sheep, coin, son. And look at how the first 2 are built, because they are training you how to read the 3rd. A shepherd loses 1 sheep, leaves the 99, and searches until he finds it, then carries it home on his shoulders and calls the neighbors to rejoice with him. A woman loses 1 coin, lights a lamp, and sweeps the whole house until she finds it, then calls the neighbors to rejoice with her. 2 stories, the same 3 moves each time. Something of value is lost, someone searches with everything they have, and the finding spills over into shared rejoicing that pulls the whole neighborhood in. You are being set up, deliberately, mechanically, to expect the 3rd story to end the same way, with the son found and everyone glad. Hold that expectation tight, because the whole point of the 3rd story is going to be the one person who hears the music, knows exactly what it means, and refuses to come in. Jesus is not telling a sweet story about forgiveness to the sinners at the front. He is telling a story aimed like an arrow at the muttering religious men at the back. Keep them in the corner of your eye the entire time. Now the story. The younger of 2 sons comes to his father and says, "Father, give me the share of the estate that is coming to me." Read quickly. That sounds like an impatient young man asking for an advance. In its own world, it is close to unspeakable. In that culture, a son received his inheritance when his father died. To walk up to your living father and demand your share now was, in effect, to say out loud that you wished he were already dead, that you were done waiting for him to die and wanted the money while it was still warm. No father in that world was under any obligation to grant it. Most would have struck the son, or thrown him out, or worse. And worse is not a figure of speech here, because the law of Moses had a provision that hangs over this whole scene like a shadow. In the book of Deuteronomy, there is a law for the stubborn and rebellious son, the one who will not obey his father or mother, who is called, in the text, a glutton and a drunkard. His parents were to bring him to the elders at the town gate, and the community was to stone him. Now we have little evidence this law was ever actually carried out, and I am not claiming the younger son met its terms like a checklist, so hold that loosely. But every listener in Jesus' audience knew that law was on the books, and they knew the words it used, a glutton and a drunkard, are exactly the life this son is about to go and live, which means the father sitting across the table is not merely a man being insulted. He is a man who, with the shadow of that law hanging over the scene, could have met this insult with the community's harshest judgment, and instead does the opposite of everything that shadow would allow. Keep that in your mind, because it is the measuring stick for just how far the father's extravagance runs. He is not being generous where he could have been stingy. He is being reckless where he could have been lethal. And here is the detail that English almost always softens. Luke says the father divided his living between them. The Greek word there is bios. In this context, it means his livelihood, his property, the estate itself. But bios is also the ordinary Greek word for life, the word we get biology from, a person's living, their livelihood, the substance of their days. Luke could have used a plain word for property. He chose the word for life. The father, asked by his son to hand over the future as if he were already a corpse, does the unthinkable thing. He agrees. He divides his bios, his life, and hands a piece of it across the table into the hand that just wished him dead. That is the first reckless, extravagant act in the parable, and it does not belong to the son. It belongs to the father. He spends himself before the boy has spent a single coin. The son gathers everything, and a few days later he is gone. He travels to a far country, the text says, and there he squanders his estate in reckless living. And here is where you have to slow down and picture what reckless living actually looked like, because the word matters for the reveal we are building toward. He spends. That is the whole of it. He spends without counting, without a harvest to replace what he burns, without a single thought for tomorrow, throwing his father's life away on strangers and pleasure, and a crowd that loves him exactly as long as the money lasts. He is, in the plainest sense of the old word, prodigal, a spender with no break. And for a while it works, because a man with a full purse in a strange city is never short of friends. And then the money runs out, and it runs out faster than he thought money could, and the far country that loved him empties out around him overnight. The friends evaporate, and precisely then, as if the world had been waiting for his last coin, a great famine settles over the whole region, and the boy who had everything is suddenly starving in a place where no one knows his name and no one owes him a thing. He attaches himself to a local landowner who sends him into the fields to feed pigs. Sit for a second with how that line would have landed on the men at the back of the room. Pigs. To a Jewish audience, the pig was the very emblem of uncleanness, an animal a Jewish family would never raise or eat. The son of a Jewish landowner is now a hired hand for a Gentile, standing knee-deep in a pen of unclean animals, and the text says he was so hungry he longed to fill his stomach with the pods the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. He has not just lost his money, he has lost his people, his religion, his name, his floor. There is no lower place in the story to fall, and a first-century listener would have felt one more turn of the knife that we miss entirely. He does not just envy other people now, he envies the pigs. The unclean animals, the very creatures the law told him never to touch, are being fed, and he is not. In the picture Jesus paints, the swine have a keeper who brings them their pods, and the Jewish landowner's son, made in the image of God, sits in their filth, wishing he could eat what they eat, and being refused even that. He has not simply sunk to the level of the unclean animal, he has sunk beneath it. The pig, in that pen, is now higher than he is. For the audience Jesus was speaking to, there was no image of a fall more total than a son of Israel who had made himself lower than a pig. That is the pit the boy is sitting in when the only thought that has not yet occurred to him finally arrives. And then comes one of the most famous phrases in the New Testament, and it is worth reading exactly. The text says, "When he came to himself," not when he repented, not yet. When he came to himself. The Greek is literally that. He came into himself, as if he had been outside his own mind and suddenly walked back into it. And what does a starving man do when he comes back to his senses? He does the math. Listen to what he actually decides. How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? And here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Watch the plan carefully, because it is not quite what we remember. The word he uses for what he wants to become is mistheos, a hired worker, a man paid by the day who is not part of the family at all, hired help, rather than a son. The son is not planning to come home and be a son. He is planning a transaction. He has calculated that even the paid workers on his father's estate eat better than he does, and he is going to go home, deliver a prepared speech, absorb the humiliation, and negotiate himself a job. Interpreters differ on whether this is the first real crack of repentance or just hunger doing the talking, and the text genuinely leaves that open. But the plan he rehearses is, on its face, a transaction. Keep the exact words of that rehearsed speech in your mind. All three parts of it. I have sinned. I am not worthy to be your son. Make me a hired servant, because in a moment the father is going to do something to that speech that most readers walk straight past. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Hold on that line. While he was still a long way off, which means the father was watching the road. This was not a father who had moved on. This was a father who had spent an unknown number of evenings on that hill, looking at the horizon where his life had walked away, waiting. And the instant he sees the shape of his son, the text says he was filled with compassion, and he ran. That single word, ran, carries more weight than we tend to hear, and here is why. On the reading of many honor-shame scholars, a grown patriarch in that world did not run. To run, he would gather the hem of his robe up in his fists and bare his legs, an undignified spectacle for a village elder. In fairness, Scripture does show other great men run to embrace someone they love, Abraham toward his visitors, Esau toward Jacob. So treat the shame reading as an interpretation of the culture rather than a verdict the text prints. There is more. Some scholars, most notably Kenneth Bailey, who spent decades among Middle Eastern village communities, argue that a son who had lost the family's wealth among Gentiles and come crawling back could expect a hostile reception from the village itself, even a ceremony of cutting off, and that the father runs precisely to reach his son first, to get to him before the village can, and to absorb the shame onto his own body in public. I want to be honest that this last piece is a scholarly reconstruction of the culture, not a line in the text, so hold it loosely. But the text itself is enough. The father runs, robes hitched, legs bare, dignity spent in the dust, and he throws his arms around the boy, who smells of pigs and kisses him. The son who spent his father's money is met by a father who is, in that instant, spending the last thing he had left to spend, his honor. Before the part, everything has been building toward. One small ask, if this is cracking the story open for you, Subscribing genuinely helps it reach the people who have heard this parable 100 times and never once caught what was happening underneath it. Now watch what the father does to the speech his son rehearsed. The son begins his prepared speech. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." And then he stops. Or rather, he is stopped. Go back and compare what he planned to say with what he actually gets to say, because the third line is missing. He rehearsed 3 things. "I have sinned. I am not worthy to be your son, and make me a hired servant." He gets the first 2 out. He never gets to the third. Now, one honest wrinkle, and it is worth stating plainly. In the earliest manuscripts, the son simply never says that third line, while a few later copies add it back in from his rehearsal. Either way, in the story as Luke hands it to us, the demotion never lands, and the natural way to read it is that the father cuts him off before the word mistheos, before the boy can turn himself into an employee, and instead the father turns to his servants and starts giving orders. And every order undoes the son's plan. "Bring the best robe," he says, "and put it on him." Not a robe. The best robe, which in that house meant the father's own, the mark of the honored guest, the restoration of status in front of everyone. Put a ring on his hand. A ring like that was very often a signet, a seal, authority pressed into wax, the power to act in the Father's name. Whatever its precise force, he is not being handed jewelry. He is being handed back his place in the family. Put sandals on his feet. In that household, the sons wore sandals and the slaves went barefoot, so sandals were a sentence spoken without words. "You are not a servant here, you are a son. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. Not a chicken, not a goat, the fattened calf, the animal kept for the biggest occasion a family would ever have. Enough meat for a feast on a village scale, because a celebration like this was rarely a private thing." The same neighbors who watched the boy leave in disgrace are the ones now being gathered to celebrate his return. The father is not quietly forgiving his son in a back room. He is throwing the most expensive, most public, most reckless party the estate can produce, and he is doing it for a boy who came home rehearsing a job application. So now stand back and count the extravagance, and count it honestly. The son spent an inheritance. The father spent more. He gave away his bios, his life, before the boy ever left. He spent his dignity in the dust of the road, robes hitched, running like a slave. He spent the best robe, the signet ring, the sandals, the fattened calf. He spent, in front of the entire village, every last thing a man of standing had to lose: his money, his honor, his authority, his reputation for good judgment. If prodigal means recklessly, foolishly, lavishly extravagant, then the son has a rival for the title, and the more extravagant of the two, the one who spends further and more foolishly, is the father. The son wasted a fortune on strangers. The father wasted everything he had left on a son who did not deserve a coin of it. And unlike the son, the father knew exactly what he was doing. The son was prodigal by accident. The father was prodigal on purpose. That is the reveal the name has been hiding from you for centuries. This was never mainly a story about a boy who wandered off. It is a story about a father whose love is so reckless it looks, to every sensible person watching, like a kind of madness. And now the part almost nobody remembers, because our version of the story ends at the party. It doesn't. There is a second son, the older one, and the whole third act belongs to him, and it is aimed straight at the men muttering at the back of the room. The older brother is out in the field, and he comes home to the sound of music and dancing. And when he hears why, he is furious, and he will not go in. So the father does the extravagant thing a second time. He goes out again, He left the house to run to the younger son on the road, and now he leaves the party to go out into the dark to the older son, pleading with him to come in. And listen to what the older brother says, because it is a confession he does not know he is making. "Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me even a young goat." The word he uses for served is the word for a slave's labor. All these years, in his own father's house, with everything already his, he has felt like a slave. And then, "But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your living with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." Notice he will not say, "My brother." He says, "This son of yours." He will not even call the boy his brother. But look back at his own first words, because they are the real confession. "These many years I have served you." Served. He is the son who never left, who never took a coin, who did everything right, and in his own telling, he has spent all those years as a slave in a house where everything already belonged to him. He was standing inside the estate the whole time, and he was never home. That is the quiet tragedy the party exposes. The younger son was lost in a far country. The older son was lost in his own father's field and never knew it. And the music is what finally drags it into the light. And the father answers him with the gentlest correction in the parable. "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." It was right to celebrate, because this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. This your brother. This. The father gives the older son back the word he refused to say, and he hands it to him the same way he handed the younger son the robe. As a gift the son has done nothing to earn and may still refuse. Twice now, the father has left the comfort of his own house to go out into the cold after a son. Once down the road to the boy who ran, and now out the door to the boy who stayed. He spends himself on both of them, and neither one has earned a coin of it. That is the single most consistent thing the father does in the entire story. And then the story simply stops. Read it again if you don't believe me. Jesus ends the parable on the father's plea, standing in the dark doorway with his hand out toward a son who has not yet moved, and he never tells us what the older brother does. He does not go in, he does not stay out. The camera just holds on the open door and the outstretched hand, and the story ends mid-scene, unfinished, with the question hanging in the cold air. And that is not sloppy storytelling. That is the whole point, and it is the one detail everyone misses. Jesus was telling this story to the older brothers. The Pharisees and scribes at the back, who had served God for years and felt no joy in it, who could not stand that their father was throwing open his house to the wrong kind of people, who muttered, "This man eats with sinners," the way the older son spat, "This son of yours." Jesus builds the entire parable to walk them right up to the doorway, and then he stops and he hands them the pen. Because the older brother in the story is them, and the ending is the one thing he cannot write for them. They have to write it themselves. Do they go in or not? Here is what stays with me about this parable, and it is not the pig field. It is the open door at the end. Picture an ordinary house on an ordinary street. Late, everyone should be asleep, and yet the porch light is still burning, and the front door has been left an inch open, and there is a plate of food kept warm on the table just inside. Nobody is standing there pressuring you. There is just the light, and the gap in the door, and the meal, waiting. That is where Jesus leaves both sons, and that is where the story leaves you, because by now you have probably noticed that it was never a story with two characters. It was a story with three, and the third one is whoever is listening. Everyone reads this parable and quietly decides they are the younger son, the one who wandered and came home, and that is a comfortable place to sit. But Jesus told it to people who were sure they were neither lost sinner nor wandering boy. And to them, he gave the older brother, Standing in the dark outside a party, his own father was begging him to join, unable to be glad that grace had gone to someone who did not earn it. If you have ever done everything right and felt like a slave in your own life, if you have ever been quietly furious that someone got a welcome they did not deserve, then you already know the older brother is not a stranger. He is the most religious man in the story, and he is the one left outside. If this changed the story for you, leave a note in the comments, however short, so it travels to the next person who is sure they already know this one, and send it on to someone who needs to work out which brother they are, because the prodigal son was never really named for the son. The recklessly extravagant one, the one who spent his life, his dignity, and his whole house on people who had not earned it, was the father, standing in a doorway with the light on and his hand out. And the story has no ending, because Jesus did not write one. He handed you the pen at the open door. The only question the parable leaves you with is the one it left hanging in the cold outside that house 2,000 years ago. Which brother are you? And are you going to go in?